A man is on a prison phone. He has been there for years. The line is recorded, and he knows it. What he is about to say, he has had time to consider. He admits that he took apart a woman's body. He used a saw. He used coolers. He drove the remains across state lines and dumped them in a creek where alligators were known to feed. And then he says he did not kill her. His name is Grant. He is serving a life sentence in North Carolina. The woman in pieces was Laura, the mother of his 2 young sons. The year was 2011. The interview is from 2024, more than a decade after a jury rejected the version of events he is still telling. Listen to what he says, and listen to what he doesn't say. Disrespecting Laura's corpse is indefensible, but I didn't kill Laura. I had nothing to do with her death. It is the only sentence in this case that matters. He is telling you that dismembering a human being is something he can admit to. The killing itself, that is the line he will not cross. After everything, after conviction, after 13 years in a cell, his instinct, when the cameras turn on, is still to manage the story. This case is not a mystery about who did it. The jury settled that. The remains in Oyster Creek settled that. A Walmart receipt time-stamped 2:40 in the morning settled that. This case is about something stranger. It is about what a man chooses to confess to, and what he chooses to deny, and what that choice tells you about who he has always been. His name is Grant Ruffin Hayes III. He performed under the name Grant Hayes, and the woman he insists he had nothing to do with killing was Laura Jean Ackerson. She was the kind of person who never let her phone go to voicemail. That detail comes from Siobhan Maths, her business partner, the woman who would, days later, file the missing person report. It was very odd that it was going straight to her voicemail, Siobhan told ABC News. She always had that phone on. Laura Jean Ackerson was 27 years old in the summer of 2011. She was born in Michigan, raised between 2 states after her parents' divorce, and had built a life for herself in Kinston, North Carolina, where she co-owned a small marketing firm called Go Fish Graphic Design. She had 2 sons, Grant IV, 3 years old, and Gentle Rain, not quite 2. Her plans had narrowed to a single, unshakable focus: getting them back. 4 years earlier, when she was 23, she had been waitressing in Raleigh. By 27, she was co-owner of a graphic design and marketing firm. She handled logos and branding for small businesses across eastern North Carolina. On the side, she had enrolled in real estate school. She had plans to build her own design firm for property agents across the region. She had built that, alone, in 4 years. She had lost primary custody 2 years earlier. Her ex had argued in court that she was unstable. She had argued in turn that he was a sociopath. Both of them were under court-ordered psychological evaluation. The August 15th custody hearing was a month away. Her father called the relationship what it had been. He was very possessive, Robert Ackerson said. It was like he owned her. Her closest friend, Heidi Schumacher, remembered what losing the children had done to Laura. The worst time in her life was when she did not get to see her kids. She was devastated. Heidi had once found Laura crying in a parking lot with a broken nose. Heidi had been threatened by Grant herself. He told her he had powerful friends, that he could kill her. She bought a gun afterward and got a concealed carry permit. Her brother Jason testified that Grant had once told Laura that if she tried to stay with him, his goon squad would hunt her down. Jason was no longer allowed in her apartment. The visits had to be in secret. By March 2011, Laura had hired a custody attorney named John Sargent. She told him she was afraid. She did not know what Grant was capable of, but she had begun to suspect. She kept going anyway. She built her business. She showed up for every court date. By July, the court-ordered psychological evaluation had come back favorable enough that her attorney believed she would get, at the very least, shared custody. On the evening of July 13, 2011, She drove from Kinston to Raleigh to see her sons. They were at Grant's apartment, where he lived with his new wife Amanda and their 1-month-old daughter. Laura left a voicemail for a friend that afternoon, saying she would stop by after the visit. Grant Ruffin Hayes III had been a working musician. That was the version of himself he wanted the world to see. He played nightclubs on the Caribbean island of St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands. A music booker on the island remembered him as a performer who understood his audience. He knew how to work his crowd and play the right music for the people in the audience, the man recalled to ABC News. Grant legally changed his surname to his stage name. He became Hayes. The decision tells you something about the man. His given name was not enough. He wanted to be the persona he had built. He wanted to be seen as that persona, on his driver's license, in court documents, in his own children's birth records. That was the public image. A charming musician, a father pursuing custody of his children, a man building a life in the islands with a new wife. The reality, established across 3 years of courtroom testimony, was something else. Her diary, entered as evidence, recorded incidents in which Amanda, his new wife, had called Laura psycho and crazy. The court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Ginger Calloway, would later testify that Grant exhibited what she described as illogical, disturbed thinking, and recommended he be evaluated by a psychiatrist. Amanda Hayes did not arrive in this story as a passive figure. She was 39 when she met Grant, 7 years his senior. She had been born in Taft, Texas, in 1972. She had worked as a cosmetologist. She had trained as a real estate agent. She had moved east to chase acting, picking up bit parts in The Sopranos, The O.C., and The Stepford Wives. By the late 2000s, she had landed in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where she opened an art supply store on the island of St. John with her teenage daughter, Shaw. That was the life she had built, by herself, across multiple states and a Caribbean island, when Grant Hayes walked into her store. Within months, they had left the islands together. They moved through New York City, married in Las Vegas, and by the spring of 2011, they were living in Raleigh with a newborn. The custody fight with Laura had become the organizing crisis of their household. Dr. Calloway's report contained one line that the prosecution would return to again and again. The wishes, comments, and actions of Grant and Amanda, she wrote, suggested they would effectively erase Laura as the children's mother. There was, in her professional opinion, a collective insensitivity to the children's needs for their mother. That was the custody battle. It was never about whether the children needed both parents. It was about removing one of them. The performance of a devoted father was not the same as being one, and the people closest to Grant Hayes had been telling Laura that for years. She knew. Her attorney would later testify that, 4 months before her death, she had sat across from him and said she didn't know what Grant would do. She still went to the apartment that night. Siobhan Mathis called the police on July 18, 2011. 5 days had passed since Laura's last voicemail. The phone went straight to voicemail every time. Siobhan knew her business partner. She knew this was wrong. A Kinston detective named James Gwartney was first to visit the Raleigh apartment. Grant met him at the door and told a clean story. Laura had come for a midweek visit on the 13th, dropped the boys off, and left after about 3 hours. He had not seen her since. He answered questions. He stayed calm. While Detective Gwartney was making his initial inquiries, Raleigh police were already pulling surveillance footage. They started with the area around the apartment building. They widened the search. They found the receipt. At 2:40 in the morning on July 14th, within hours of Laura's last contact with anyone, Grant Hayes was at a Raleigh Walmart. He was buying a reciprocating saw. He was buying extra blades. He was buying a tarp. The receipt was time-stamped. The cameras had captured him at the register. In the days that followed, more footage emerged. Grant purchasing duffel bags. Grant purchasing coolers. Grant purchasing bleach. Days later, In a different state entirely, the same couple was captured again, Grant and Amanda, at a hardware store in Texas, buying muriatic acid and chemical-resistant gloves. Detective Sergeant Robert Latour of the Raleigh Homicide Unit followed the paper trail to Richmond, Texas. He arrived at the home of Amanda Hayes' older sister, Karen Berry, 14 years Amanda's senior, the woman who had helped raise her. He had not announced himself ahead of time. Karen had been sitting in her living room reading her Bible when she saw the detectives approach. By the time she opened the door, she was already crying. "I've been expecting you," she said. "Before we speak, do you mind if I pray?" Karen Berry told him everything. The couple had arrived a week earlier with a rented U-Haul, 3 children, and a strange, fixed interest in the alligator-infested creek across the street. They had asked about borrowing her boat. They had asked about the depth of the water. They had taken what they called a fishing trip at night. On the second morning, Karen said, her sister Amanda had pulled her aside. "She told me she needed to talk to me. It was serious. She told me Laura was dead, and she had done it." Karen had sat with that knowledge for 3 days. She had watched her sister leave with the children and drive back to North Carolina. She had read the news reports out of Raleigh about a missing mother. By the time the detectives came to her door, she had been waiting, praying, for someone to come and ask her the question she could not bring herself to answer alone. The body parts were recovered from Oyster Creek beginning July 24th. The dive team from the Houston Police Department searched the murky water. They found a torso. They found limbs. They found a skull. Dental records confirmed it was Laura. The autopsy, performed by the Chief Medical Examiner of North Carolina, Dr. Deborah Radish, established homicidal violence but could not determine the precise cause of death. The remains were too damaged. What Dr. Radish could establish was specific: a sharp puncture wound to the 4th cervical vertebra and crushed thyroid cartilage, injuries consistent with asphyxia, with blunt force trauma to the neck, or with both. Grant and Amanda were arrested on July 25, 2011. Each was charged with first-degree murder. They would be tried separately. Each would build a defense around blaming the other. Grant's account, repeated in a January 2014 phone interview and again in 2024, ran as follows. Laura came to the apartment to negotiate a custody settlement. She had agreed, on paper, to surrender the children for $25,000. Amanda was angry. They did not have that kind of money. Grant said he was out of the room when an argument escalated. Laura threatened to take their newborn daughter. Amanda struck her in the neck with her elbow. Laura died. Grant said he drank half a bottle of vodka and went to a Walmart to buy what he needed to make the body disappear. Amanda's account was different. She said she knew nothing about Laura's death until they reached Texas. She said Grant had transported the body in a U-Haul without her knowledge. She said he had threatened her with a machete in writing from jail with her infant daughter's life, and that she had helped only out of fear. The prosecution rejected both versions. A Wake County jail inmate named Pablo Trinidad testified at Grant's trial. He had been housed near Grant in the weeks after the arrest. According to Trinidad, Grant told him that he lured Laura to the apartment under false pretenses, that he and Amanda subdued her together, strangled her, and dismembered the body afterward. Trinidad also said Grant had told him something specific about why he had needed his wife's help. He didn't have the strength in his hands to do it alone. The forensic record told a third story: a 3-foot bleach stain in the apartment foyer, a single drop of blood on the bedroom mattress, a handwritten note, supposedly signed by Laura, agreeing to surrender custody, handwriting that resembled hers, but which her family and friends insisted she would never have signed, an email Grant sent to Laura 2 days after she died, accusing her of going dark on him. Then there were the photographs. The prosecution introduced images, taken by surveillance cameras and seized phones, of Amanda Hayes disposing of evidence in Texas. She was alone in those pictures. Grant was nowhere near her. The story she told, that she had been coerced at every step, did not match what the cameras had captured. Grant Hayes was convicted of first-degree murder on September 16, 2013. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amanda Hayes went to trial in early 2014. Her defense built its case on the argument that her husband was a sociopath who had manipulated and threatened her. They pointed to a knife found in her SUV. They pointed to letters Grant had written her from jail. They argued that any role she had played in the disposal of Laura's body came under duress. The prosecution had Karen Berry. Berry's testimony in Amanda's trial was sharper than it had been in Grant's. 5 months earlier, she had told jurors only that her sister had said she had hurt Laura and hurt her bad. Sworn in again, she gave the jury something more direct. She testified that she had helped raise Amanda, that she had taught her sister, like she taught her own children, that when you lie, you get one chance to look her in the eye and tell the truth. That morning in Texas, she said, Amanda had told her the truth. She told me Laura was dead, and she had done it. The prosecution closed with the photographs. Amanda alone, with bottles of muriatic acid. Amanda alone, near the creek. Amanda alone, in moments no coerced wife could explain away. On February 19, 2014, the jury convicted her of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 13 to 16 years in North Carolina. 4 years later, a Texas court convicted her of tampering with evidence. She received an additional 20-year sentence to be served consecutively. In the summer of 2024, she was transferred from a North Carolina facility to a Texas prison to begin serving it. In October 2024, ABC News broadcast a 2020 episode that included a phone interview with Grant Hayes from prison. He was 13 years into his life sentence. He had been denied appeal after appeal. He had nothing left to negotiate for. The journalist Juju Chang asked him directly about the crime, and Grant Hayes gave her a sentence that, once you understand him, is the most revealing thing he has ever said. Disrespecting Laura's corpse is indefensible, but I didn't kill Laura. I had nothing to do with her death. Hold that sentence in your hand for a moment. He is admitting, on the record, to dismembering a human being. He is using the language of moral conscience, indefensible, to describe what he did with the body. In the same breath, he is denying the act that led to her being a body in the first place. He went further. I'm not in prison for being a bad person, he told her. I'm in prison for killing a woman, and that didn't happen. A man who has had 13 years to think about his own life, about what he did, what was done in his name, what he owes the mother of his children, picks up a prison phone and uses it not to apologize, not to confess, not to explain. He uses it to perform. That is the jaw drop. The years did not change him. They only gave him time to refine the script. To understand how this happens, we need to step back from the timeline. There is a specific pattern in the way Grant Hayes has organized his account of the crime, and behavioral researchers have a name for it. It is called image management. People who exhibit it do not experience their actions as a coherent moral whole. They divide what they have done into two categories: what fits the self-image they intend to project, and what does not. The first category, they can speak about freely. The second category does not exist. In Grant's mental map of his own life, dismembering Laura's body is a moral failure he can acknowledge. He drank vodka. He made a terrible decision. He behaved in a way that was, in his own word, indefensible. He can live with that man. Killing her is something else. To admit to killing her would be to admit to the kind of man he has always insisted he is not. So that act, the central act of the crime, is exiled from his story. This is not the same as lying. Lying requires you to know the truth and to choose to misrepresent it. What Grant Hayes is doing is something more durable. He has constructed a version of himself in which the murder belongs to someone else, and he has lived inside that version for so long that he no longer experiences it as a story. He experiences it as the truth. The charm functions the same way. Charm, in a person like Grant Hayes, is not personality, it is infrastructure. It is the tool he uses to make other people see the version of him he has decided is real. The music booker on St. John remembered him as a performer who could read a room and give it what it wanted. That skill did not stop when he got off the stage. He used it on Laura, on Amanda, on the detectives in 2011, on a journalist in 2024. The custody battle was the same mechanism, scaled up. Grant did not need shared custody to be a father to his sons. He could have been a father without a court order. What he needed was for Laura to be removed. Her continued existence as their mother was not a problem of access. It was a problem of authorship. As long as she was alive and in their lives, she was telling a different story about him to his own children. The custody fight was an attempt to silence that story. When the legal process began to fail him, when the evaluator's report came back recommending shared custody, when Laura looked likely to win at the August hearing, the silencing took a different form. This is the deeper pattern, the one this channel exists to examine. People who seem completely normal often seem that way because the normalcy is the performance. The charm, the career, the role of devoted father, all of it can be deployed by someone with no real commitment to any of it. What looks like personality, in some people, is a service rendered to the world in exchange for being left alone with whatever they actually are. Laura's two sons are now teenagers. Grant the fourth was 3 years old when his mother died. Gentle Rain was almost 2. They have grown up knowing that their father is in prison for killing their mother. They were raised by Grant's parents in North Carolina, alongside their half-sister Lily, Grant and Amanda's daughter, who was an infant in a crib down the hall on the night Laura was killed. Their father has not stopped maintaining his innocence. From a state prison cell, he continues to give interviews. He continues to revise the story. He has had appeal after appeal denied, and the legal record has been settled for over a decade. And still he tells the same version, to anyone who will listen, in which someone else killed the woman whose body he dismembered. That is what Laura's children have to grow up with. Not the closure of a confession, not even the silence of a man who has decided to stop talking. They have to grow up with a father who is still actively constructing a version of their mother's death in which he is the wronged party. Amanda Hayes is in a Texas prison. She will be there for another 2 decades. Karen Berry, the sister who told the truth that brought the case to trial, has not spoken publicly since her testimony.